Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating, highly structured framework straight from our source materials. We're looking at a strict biblical counseling paradigm designed for overcoming those deep-rooted struggles and life-dominating sins. Now, whether you're studying theology, counseling, or honestly just curious about how different frameworks tackle human behavior, this is a pretty profound deep dive. The main argument here? Lasting change doesn't just happen. It requires a massive paradigm shift, basically moving totally away from secular labels and looking squarely at the heart. Here's our roadmap for this paradigm shift. We'll start with the battle of the mind, then move into rethinking the disease model, followed by idols of the heart. After that, we'll evaluate standard recovery programs, and finally, we'll map out the path to freedom. All right, part 1, the battle of the mind, taking thoughts captive. So the sources really emphasize that the very first battleground in overcoming any enslaving habit is actually our own thought life, right? Destructive behaviors, anxiety, unwanted urges, self-doubt, they don't just pop up out of nowhere in a vacuum. They start as tiny little thoughts. To combat this, the framework points straight to 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. This acts as a clear mandate to actively confront those intrusive thoughts. It's not about just ignoring them or pushing them down, but really militantly confronting lies with truth, so your mind isn't just cruising on some unguided worldly autopilot. To actually do this, our sources outline a super practical 3-step guidebook approach for taking thoughts captive in real time. Step 1 is awareness. You've got to recognize that intrusive thought the exact second it pops up. Step 2 is interrupt. You actively stop the thought using a physical or verbal cue, like literally clapping your hands or saying stop right out loud. It totally breaks the momentum of that negative pattern. And step 3 is replace, because you can't just leave a blank void in your mind, right? You have to actively redirect your focus to a specific promise from the text, which gives you immediate tactical control. Moving right along to section 2, rethinking the disease model, shifting the paradigm. Now we're pivoting a bit. The biblical counseling sources present a pretty massive critique of the widely accepted secular explanations for addiction, specifically the disease model. Let's draw a stark contrast here. The prevailing medical model treats addiction as a pathology. The main goals there are removing guilt, assigning a victim status to the individual, and basically just managing long-term sobriety. But the source material points out a really fascinating critique. Since there's currently no known biological marker or molecular diagnosis for addiction, treating it strictly as a medical disease kind of misses the mark. Instead, this biblical model addresses these behaviors as a foundational moral and worship problem. It argues the ultimate goals should actually be repentance, genuine heart change, and completely overcoming slavery to sin. Section 3. Idols of the heart, the true root cause. So if the root isn't a biological disease, what on earth is it? Well, the framework looks way deeper, moving from the mechanics of the mind straight down into the heart. External influences, like your stressful job, terrible traffic, or even sickness, they absolutely impact you, but they don't cause the behavior. External behaviors, whether that's substance abuse, explosive anger, or overeating, they're really just symptoms. What bridges the gap? The core of the heart. These behaviors are driven by internal, ruling desires, or idols, that act like a filter for how individuals respond to their circumstances. Let's break down some of these incredibly common, everyday idols. Things like approval, control, power, comfort, or material items. Now, the sources make a really crucial clarification here. An idol is usually just a perfectly good desire that has morphed into a ruling demand. Honestly, there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting a nap or desiring respect, but when that desire goes bad, when someone starts living their life entirely to serve that desire instead of God, and they're willing to literally sin to get it, that is when it becomes a ruling idol that totally dictates their behavior. To help figure out what someone might actually be worshiping, the text offers a couple of incredibly powerful diagnostic questions. Number 1, I will sin if I don't get what? Or, number 2, what do I demand that I absolutely must have? Take a second and just reflect on those questions for yourself. If you convince yourself you absolutely need something, like approval or total control, you can justify doing almost anything to get your hands on it. And according to this framework, that exact moment is when a simple desire hardens into an idol. All right, section 4, evaluating recovery programs, critiquing the status quo. Here the sources take a hard look at modern addiction treatment and outline several theological shortcomings they see in standard 12-step programs and even in Christian-branded alternatives. First off, they argue these programs rely on a vague higher power, which they say directly contradicts the biblical insistence on the specific gospel of Christ. Second, the focus is heavily on managing subjective character defects rather than genuinely repenting of sin against a holy God. And here is a particularly fascinating critique from the text, the charge of eisegesis. The sources argue that programs like Celebrate Recovery take scriptures, specifically the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount, and apply them totally out of their original context, just to fit a 12-step recovery narrative. They argue this effectively swaps out true repentance for a secular focus on symptom management. Which brings us to our final section, the path to freedom, radical change. So how does someone actually escape this cycle? The sources introduce this pretty severe concept called radical amputation to achieve a holistic and dramatic restructuring of your life. Taking its cue from Matthew chapter 5, this metaphor is intense. It stresses that followers of this paradigm have to aggressively restructure their lives and forcefully rip out any obstacle to obedience. If a smartphone, internet access, or certain social circles are the gateway to an enslaving habit, the biblical paradigm demands they be completely cut off. You don't just manage the temptation, you aggressively amputate its access to your life. To actually achieve that level of change, the sources map out a holistic tree of repentance. It operates just like a living organism. It has to grow from deep, hidden roots of contemplation, moving all the way up through the trunk of confession to eventually display the visible, outward fruit of change, love and humility. It's an incredibly organic and comprehensive process. Let's look at how this builds step by step. First up is contemplation, viewing the behavior vertically, meaning how God sees it, and horizontally, meaning how it hurts others. Second is confession. This needs to be extremely specific, completely forsaking the behavior with a broken heart. Third is restitution. This isn't just paying back a debt. It's going way out of your way to make the situation even better than it was before. And finally, reconciliation, which is actively pursuing healed and restored relationships. The sources draw a really sharp line here between godly sorrow and worldly sorrow. Worldly sorrow, that's just feeling bad about getting caught and wanting to dodge the consequences. Godly sorrow, on the other hand, leads to this kind of earnest, undeniable action and a complete restructure of your life. As we wrap up the explainer, I want to leave you with one final, pretty provocative thought right from the source material. Are you simply managing a disease, or are you ready to renew your mind and completely uproot the idols of your heart? The strict paradigm we've explored today really challenges its readers to seek out genuine, permanent heart transformation over simple behavior management. Yes, it's a deep, incredibly demanding framework, but it's one the author's promise leads to absolute freedom. Thanks so much for unpacking this with me today, and hey, keep asking those deep questions.